Well, where are we now? Sosa has entertained and rejected the coherentist doxastic assent argument. Doesn't work. Now he turns his attention to the foundationalist and their argument in favor of their view, the regress argument. As we'll see, the regress argument requires that you be able to justify rejecting the other three possible ways in which a regress could resolve itself. This way doesn't work, this way doesn't work, this way doesn't work. Have to reject all of those in order to conclude that the fourth and final way, that epistemic regresses originate in intrinsically justified or self-justified or basic beliefs. In order to conclude that, you have to eliminate the other possibilities, as we'll see. Sosa argues, I don't think you can do that, foundationalists. I think specifically, you can't give me a good reason why infinite regresses that give rise to justified beliefs aren't possible. You can't rule those out as a possibility. The logic of the argument, the structure of the argument is such, if you can't rule out the other three possibilities, then you can't conclude the fourth one has to be true, so your argument fails, as we'll see. After having contemplated and rejected the coherentist argument and contemplated and rejected the foundationalist argument, Sosa now wants to reflect back on his examination of these views and their arguments and see what insights have emerged. He focuses on what he calls formal foundationalism. The terminology might be a bit confusing, but think of it this way. When we're thinking about foundationalism, our theory that specifies what it is for a belief to be justified under foundationalism, we're going to call that substantive foundationalism. So that's the substance of the view, substantive foundationalism. Formal foundationalism is the form the view has to take. What does it have to accomplish and how does it have to accomplish it? Formal foundationalism is just a view about the form a theory of justification needs to take. Sosa says the form that a theory of justification needs to take is it has to be able to specify without recourse to epistemic or evaluative language what it is for a mental state like a belief to have justification supervene on it. What does that mean? All it means is that that belief realizes the epistemic property of justification. So you can think about it in a sort of simple example. What is it to be a doorstop? What is it to be an instance of a doorstop? In order to be an instance of a doorstop, the property of being a doorstop has to supervene on some object. There has to be some reason why that object is an instance of being a doorstop. So let's take a wedge of wood or rubber. We look at that wedge of wood or rubber and we say, okay, why is that wedge a doorstop? What is it about that wedge that allows the property of being a doorstop to supervene on it? Well, because it's a wedge, it's got frictional resistance with the floor. When you stick it in that crack between the floor and the door, it's got frictional resistance. Because it's a wedge, the more pressure that the door puts on it, the more pressure gets translated into frictional resistance with the floor, and hence the wedge effectively uses frictional resistance to stop the door. Those properties are why being a doorstop supervenes on that rubber or wood wedge. That's the form of the story we want to tell with regard to justification and beliefs. Now, how ambitious are we going to be with that story? Sosa distinguishes three different grades of formal foundationalism. The first one just says, I can tell you a story about why this belief realizes justification, why justification supervenes on this belief. Yeah, it works, okay. That's not very ambitious, though, he says. Better would be if I can specify a set of reasons so that any belief that in fact satisfies them, justification supervenes on that. They realize justification. That would be great. The best ever, though, well-behaved supervenience. I can specify a simple set of properties that perhaps I can even recursively apply again and again to show for any belief, insofar as it realizes justification, insofar as justification supervenes on it, it does so in virtue of these properties or some recursive application of these properties. Substantive foundationalism, a theory that would deliver on that promise. Here is exactly the substance of the reasons why. Formal foundationalism, the form that theory has to take. What's its goal? How's it trying to accomplish that goal? Let's turn to the regress argument. We're familiar with the regress argument. This should be pretty straightforward. Suppose I justifiably believe some belief, like all crows are black. Either that belief becomes justified by reference to another belief, say through justificational transfer via inference from past observational beliefs, or it's self-justified, it's intrinsically justified. My belief isn't intrinsically justified, so it must be justified through transfer of justification via inference from other beliefs. So those other beliefs have to be justified in order to transfer their justification to this belief through inference. What about those beliefs then? Well, since the belief that all crows are black is not self-justified, it has to become justified through this mechanism of justificational transfer via inference. If that belief that transfers its justification to my crow belief isn't self-justified, then it has to get its justification via inferential transfer, and so on and so on and so on and so on. So there are 4 exactly, and no more, ways that this regress could resolve itself. And this is important. I now specify a disjunctive set of mutually exclusive and jointly exhaustive possibilities. There are these 4 possible ways my regress could resolve itself. Only one of them will be true of that regress, and these are the only ones. Mutually exclusive, only one can be true. Jointly exhaustive, there are no other possibilities. That is my disjunction. Now, I want to go through and eliminate 3 of those disjuncts. One of these has to be true. Can't be this one, can't be this one, can't be this one. Therefore, it must be that one. And that is our next step in the argument. Termination in a non-basic or unjustified belief, that won't result in my crow belief being justified. There's no justification to pass forward, so there's no justification at all. Not going to work. That one's gone. Second possibility, circular regress. I justify by reference to a belief, to another belief, to another belief. Eventually, I get back to a belief I previously mentioned, and I just stop there. That circular regress isn't consistent with my being justified in my crow belief either. Since there's no original injection of justification there, but only transfer of justification, there isn't any justification to transfer once I circle back to a belief that doesn't yet have justification. So, P2, circular regress, gone, says the foundationalist. P3, infinite regress. I just keep going back. Every time I hit a belief, there's another belief that's used to justify it, and so on, and so on, and so on, in a never-ending progression. Yeah, it can't work, says the foundationalist. That's just psychologically false, says the foundationalist. And it provides one with no unqualified transfer of justification. How can it be that my belief gets justified if I'm forever appealing to a previous belief, and that process of appealing to that previous belief, it never ends? And of course, when I think about my psychology, I didn't spend an infinite amount of time inferring belief to get to my crow belief. That one's gone. That leaves the 4th possibility as the last possibility standing. These are mutually exclusive and jointly exhaustive. Either P1 is true, or P2 is true, or P3 is true, or P4 is true. I've now eliminated P1 through 3. P4 has to be true. It's the last possibility standing. So it must be the case that my justificatory regress terminates in one or more self-justifying, intrinsically justified basic beliefs. Victory, says the foundationalist. Not so fast, says Sosa. There's nothing worse than a philosopher who's drunk on logic. Let's take a moment and look back at P3. And that's what we'll do in the next lecture module.